All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome. Looks like everyone's getting signed on here. Uh, my name is Dylan High. I'm the statewide partnerships coordinator here with the Washington State Historical Society, and we're super excited to have you all here today for our common concerns, all about digital preservation with community webs. Before we get started, I just want to encourage you all, if you can introduce yourself in the chat, your name and the organization you're with, that would be great. We're gonna get started. I'll introduce our speaker here. We are super excited to have joining us today. I have my colleague Allison Campbell, who works with me in field services, and we have Anna Trammell, who is the programs manager with the community archiving project at Internet Archive. Anna is a longtime archivist and historian. She's worked with the Tacoma Public Library, as well as with Pacific Lutheran University. And we're also super excited that she is part of our community advisory committee here with the Washington State Historical Society. So we're super excited to have Anna come and talk with us today a little bit more about this Community Webs program and how this can support your work at your organization. So with that, I'm going to turn things over to Anna.
Okay, thank you, Dylan. I'm really excited to be here to talk to you today about some of the resources that are available to you from the Internet Archive to support some of the work that you're doing in your communities to preserve and provide access to local stories. And I'm also going to be telling you about a special partnership we are launching with the Washington State Historical Society to support the work that you're doing here in Washington. So I will try to keep my presentation fairly short, so we'll have plenty of time for questions. So as Dylan mentioned, I am the Community Archiving Program Manager for the Internet Archive, which is headquartered in San Francisco, but I am based here in Tacoma. And I started in this role a little under a year ago. And before this, I was the manager of archives and special collections at Tacoma Public Library. So many of you may be familiar with the Northwest Room. And when I was in that role, we actually had the opportunity to become a member of the Internet Archive's Community Webs program. So I definitely believe in the mission of the program and can speak to its value from someone who was involved as a member before I started managing this program. So for those of you who may be unfamiliar with the Internet Archive is a 501c3 nonprofit, and our mission is to provide universal access to all knowledge. So we were founded in 1996 with the goal of preserving the internet, which at that time was still new. So some of you may have heard of the Wayback Machine, and that's how most people know us. And this is a tool that allows you to access previous versions of web pages, including content that's been removed from the web that you can no longer access. And the Wayback Machine has been in the news a lot lately because journalists and others are using it to access federal government pages that have been removed or altered in recent months. So we have nearly 3 decades of web history preserved and made accessible, and we work with thousands of libraries and archives and museums all over the world to preserve and provide access to archived web pages. But that's not all that we do. We also operate digitization centers all over the country where we digitize content that's either donated to the Internet Archive or we digitize the collections of other cultural heritage organizations. And we also provide access to previously digitized collections held by individuals or organizations all over the world. So today, the Internet Archive contains over 900 billion preserved web pages, in addition to 60 million books, about 20 million audio recordings, 10 million videos, plus images, software programs, and other types of content. So millions of people visit the Internet Archive each day, and we're one of the top 100 websites in the world. We preserve a lot of web content on our own. So I mentioned, we preserve a lot of the .gov websites, and we do that at the end of each presidential term. So we are, constantly working to preserve online content, but, there are billions of web pages, and many of them change every day. So we can't do it all on our own. And, we don't necessarily know what online content is or is going to be most important for your community to have access to in the future. So one way to think about this is in your community, maybe you've always had a newspaper that was published every day in print. Maybe your organization received those print copies and saved them, and now you have access to that full run of newspapers. But in many of our communities, the newspapers have stopped being published every day, or they've moved completely online. So think about all of that content that maybe is not being captured and not being preserved. So in 2014, a study was conducted that you can see here that showed that the vast majority of organizations that were involved in preserving online content were colleges and universities. So that's great. We work with a lot of colleges and universities, but they were primarily preserving content related to their own organizations. So a lot of their departmental web pages and things like that. So you see that public libraries and museums were barely even registering in this study. So our response to this was to form the Community Webs program. So we started the Community Webs program in 2017, and this was an Institute of Museum and Library Services funded program, and it was really designed to empower public libraries to build collections of web published materials that documented their local communities. And we wanted to have a particular focus on voices that have been underrepresented in the local history record. So the initiative launched with 27 public libraries in 16 states of all different sizes and regions. And we provided training and technology and technical support to allow them to begin preserving online content. So in 2020, we received some support from the Mellon Foundation, and we were able to expand. And most recently, with another round of funding from the Mellon Foundation, we expanded to begin welcoming new members into the program. So in addition to public libraries, which is how we started, we began accepting community archives, historical societies, history museums, really any kind of organization that's focused on preserving local history. And we also began expanding the services that we provide to those members. So in addition to supporting the preservation of web content, we also began supporting their digital preservation needs, digitization, collections access, and community archiving. So we support all of those areas now. And currently, there are over 250 organizations participating in the program from across 46 states, 7 Canadian provinces, and a growing handful from outside of North America. And collectively, these organizations have built over 1,500 web archive collections, totaling hundreds of millions of individual primary source records and over 200 terabytes of archived data. And many of these organizations are creating web archive collections around these themes. So they're, again, focusing on stories and voices that have been left out of the local history record, but also preserving things related to their local arts and culture, community groups, local government sites, local businesses, local news, as I mentioned, as a growing concern for members of our program as their newspaper disappears or merges or moves to an online only format, but also responding to urgent needs. So as events occur in these communities, they're using web archiving tools to document the local response. So for example, we have a number of members that were impacted by Hurricane Helene, and they were set up to begin capturing that online content sort of as it was being published online in the aftermath of that natural disaster. So the Community Webs program is currently accepting applications on a rolling basis. So I want to tell you more about what members of the program receive. And keep in mind, these services are free to the organizations who are accepted into the program. So the first thing, which I've been talking about, is web archiving. And this is how the Community Webs program started and still an area of focus, even though we've expanded into other areas. So any member of the Community Webs program, they have access to a tool that we call Archive It. And this is a service that allows you to set up what we call crawls of websites that you want to preserve. So this is more than just, getting a screenshot, for example, of a website. This actually allows you to create something called a work file. So it will allow your users to interact with a website as it appeared on the day that it was captured. And you can schedule these crawls. So if, for example, you're wanting to preserve your organization's website and it only changes, once a year or pretty infrequently, you can set up an annual crawl for that content. But if you're interested in preserving your local news site and that's updated on a daily basis, then you're going to want to set up, more frequent crawls of that content. Excuse me. So this is kind of the back-end system that allows you to set up these crawls and preserve the web content, but it's also a front-end system. So every organization that's a member of the program will have a public-facing discovery platform that they can point their users to in order to interact with these archived web pages. So what you see here, kind of the background image, one of our members in Snohomish County is focused on preserving a variety of local websites. They've been a member of Community Webs for a number of years now, but they actually started working recently to capture local DEI sites, so sites related to diversity, equity, and inclusion that may have been in danger of being removed from the live web. So they created this new collection, they set up these crawls, and they're preserving that content. And then what you see in the front, this is a website that I preserved when I was working at Tacoma Public Library from the Tacoma Tree Foundation. So you can see and interact with that website on the day that it was captured, and you can go back in time and see how it's changed over time. So in addition to web archiving, we also offer support for digital preservation. So if your organization has a lot of digitized content that you have, scanned over the years, you really need to be aware of kind of digital preservation best practices and how to make sure that all that work that you've put into scanning that material isn't lost. So we try to make it easy for members of Community Webs. We provide training for them around digital preservation. And this training is really designed for small, often under-resourced organizations. So we try to make it realistic. Maybe these are the best practices. This is what we think, are reasonable workflows that you can implement in your organization. So right now we're working with an organization called Digital Power, and they are specifically focused on training under-resourced, small staffed organizations on digital preservation. So we offer some in-person trainings with them and some virtual trainings. We also provide access to, here's what other organizations are doing. Here's some example workflows and policies you can implement at your organization. And then we also provide free access to an Internet Archive service called Vault. So this and Archive It are services that we provide for a fee to other organizations. But if you're accepted into the Community Webs program, there's no fee for this. So we provide a 0.5 terabyte of storage in this system, and you're seeing kind of the back end system here of Vault. So this is not for public access, but if you want to make sure that your content, your preservation copies of your digitized files are preserved, you can upload them into the system. And again, we provide all Community Webs members with a 0.5 terabyte of free storage. And this is aligned with digital preservation best practices. So if I scan a photograph and I upload it to the system, I know that it's going to automatically be backed up in 3 geographically distributed locations. So if I upload that photograph, I'm going to be able to see, okay, I know that this is safe because I've got one copy that is preserved on a server in San Francisco, and I've got one copy that's on a server at the Internet Archives Data Center in Vancouver, and I've got another one that's over in Amsterdam. So I can actually see where my photograph is backed up, and I know that there are 3 copies that are preserved according to standards and best practices. This also automatically runs quarterly fixity checks for you, which basically means you'll receive a report by email that tells you your files are safe, nothing has changed about them, we've verified it, we're going to verify it again in a few months to make sure that nothing has changed about your file and that everything's safe. So this is a really flexible portal. You can upload any type of content into the system. But again, this is for the purpose of kind of your backend system and making sure that you have access to those files long term. But we also support collections access. Excuse me, I am going to skip ahead and then go back. So collections access. So this is one of our member organizations based in Mississippi, the Hancock County Library System. And we work with them to provide free access to their digitized materials. So they didn't have any sort of access portal for their digitized content. So we work with them. We set up this collection page in the Internet Archive. They can upload digitized publications and photographs. They can create different collections, and they can point their users here. And their users have the ability to, search these publications, use these publications online, download them, and also all of this content links back to that library system. So for members of the Community Webs program, if they are interested in providing access to their collections through the Internet Archive, we can set up a page like this for you and provide some training about what that looks like to share your content here. And we actually have a fairly new member that just joined the beginning of this year from Washington that has a University of Washington iSchool student that's working with them right now to upload a lot of their collections into the Internet Archive. And this provides, access to your collections. You can point your users here, and you don't have to worry about the size of your collections. There's no limit that we impose on this. We really want you to share your collections through the Internet Archive. It helps us get closer to, our mission of universal access to all knowledge by providing access to these local history collections. So collections access is something that we also support. And then I want to go back here to talk about digitization. So as I mentioned, we operate digitization centers all over the country, and we also have a couple in Canada. And any organization can work with us to have their content digitized. We do have a fee-based structure. A lot of colleges and universities, for example, work with us to digitize their collections. They send their collections to one of our scanning centers. We digitize it. We automatically upload all of that content into archive.org, the Internet Archive, so that it's publicly accessible and where you have access to it. So that is a service that we offer to many organizations. For Community Webs members, we are able to offer that service at a reduced rate. It's basically just cost recovery. So how can we not lose money doing this with the staffing, our digitization staff and our equipment? but it is a far reduced rate for members that are in the Community Webs program. We also do apply for grants to be able to digitize content from Community Webs members at no cost to their organizations. So you see here an issue of the Tacoma Facts. We had a grant that we were working on with members of the Community Webs program from all across the country, and we were able to digitize some of their collections at no cost, including this newspaper, the Tacoma Facts. So that has now been completely digitized and is available in the Internet Archive, publicly available there. And then Tacoma Public Library, who we worked with on this project, also has access to all of those files, so they can, upload it into their local database if that's what they'd like to do. Unfortunately, this project was funded by the National Endowment for the Humanities. So while we digitized thousands of pages from Community Webs members all over the country, we weren't able to complete that project. The grant was terminated. So we received that termination notice last month, and we had to stop this project. But we were able to get a lot done before that happened. So we've also had similar funds to be able to do projects like this from the National Archives and from IMLS. So we're not sure what the future looks like from those opportunities given the federal funding situation. However, we just submitted another application to the Council for Library and Information Resources, which is not tied to federal funding. So we did submit a grant application there that if that grant is successful, we'll have access to other funds to be able to digitize some Community Webs members' collections. So sometimes we work with, state grants, or if your organization wants to fundraise around a digitization project, we can support you in that to give you an idea of this is how much it would cost at the reduced rate for us to digitize. These are the shipping costs, and then that will give you an idea of how you can fundraise around that. But we're able to, do this digitization really quickly and at scale because we have staff at these digitization centers and equipment that's really designed to go through this process more quickly than you may be able to at your organization. And we talked about collections access. So in addition to the things that I just talked about, we also support Community Webs members in other ways. So something that's fairly new for us that we just started about a year ago is providing training and support around community archiving. So by community, when I say community archiving, what I mean is, community-led, community-focused preservation initiatives. So this could be, an oral history project that you want to work on in your community. It could be hosting community scanning days and inviting the public in to bring in their family photographs and have those digitized. This could be setting up, a public memory lab where people come in and can digitize their home movies. So really anything related to engaging the community and kind of developing your collection. So we offer training and support around this. We are working with an instructor right now named Natalie Milbroach. She's the founder of the Queen's Memory Project in New York. She's done a lot of community archiving, and we're working with her. She's providing training, and also for Community Webs members, you can book just a one-on-one kind of hour-long appointment with her to talk about the project that you want to work on, and she can give you, feedback and suggestions and access to different forms and policies that you may want to adapt for your own purposes. So this is a new area for us, but a lot of people have really taken advantage of this. We're actually going to be in San Francisco later this week with a group of Community Webs members from all over the country, and we're going to be doing some training around community archiving. We also offer other training and professional development. So we have one virtual training per month for Community Webs members focused on any of the areas that we support. So collections access, digitization, digital preservation, community archiving. So we offer one of those per month. Some that we have coming up are focused on kind of community engagement and public programs. We have some oral history trainings coming up, some more digital preservation trainings later this year. And then we have a training that's going to be specifically focused on how to preserve local news sites, since sometimes there can be particular challenges with that content, just given the frequency with which they change and how big some of those sites can be because of the multimedia nature of the content. So those are some of the trainings that we have coming up. We also have in-person trainings that we are able to support. So right now, thanks to our funding from the Mellon Foundation, we can provide travel stipends to members of the Community Webs program to participate in these trainings. So later this week, we have a number of Community Webs members coming into San Francisco, and we're able to fund their airfare and lodging to participate in that training. We also have a training coming up in Philadelphia in June. It's going to be a 2-day training with Natalie Milbrodt giving a training on community archiving, Digital Power giving a digital preservation training, and plus we have some local repository tours and things like that. So we're able to fund Community Webs members to travel and participate in that. And then other opportunities for professional development. So we have a lot of opportunities for Community Webs members to present both to virtually to other organizations, but also we support their participation in conferences. We have a group that's presenting at the American Library Association conference, and we're able to support their participation in that for them to talk about the work that they're doing in the program. And then we also offer opportunities for collaboration. So we really try to support bringing together different Community Webs members that are working on similar projects so that they can learn from each other or collaborate, or in some cases, apply for grant funding for a project that they all want to engage in. And this is something that we're doing right now, again, around this need to preserve local news. We've been able to pull a group of Community Webs members together to apply for some funding to be able to tackle that challenge. So a lot of times these opportunities come up and we put them out to Community Webs members and try to make those connections. So we have a exciting new partnership. We are partnering with the Washington State Historical Society to launch the Community Webs Washington cohort. So you all would be eligible to apply for Community Webs at any time and just be accepted into the program. We accept new organizations on a rolling basis. But one thing that we felt was kind of missing in recent years, since we've moved from kind of a cohort model of a big group joining all at once to just accepting on a rolling basis, is that maybe there's not as much opportunity for collaboration and learning with a group of your peers. So we actually launched a similar project with the state of Michigan back in January, where we put out a special call for organizations in Michigan to all join at the same time. And then they went through that training process together, had some opportunities for discussion and collaboration. And now those organizations they've gone through the training, they've gone through the discussion groups. Now they're all kind of working together on launching projects at their organizations that are focused on one of the areas supported by Community Webs. So I'm working with Dylan and Allison on something similar in Washington. So we currently have an application open, a special application to join the Washington cohort of the Community Webs program. So I have a bit.ly link here, which Dylan, if you could drop that into the chat, that would be great. So if you go to bit.ly/communitywebsWA, you will see some more information about that program and a link to apply. So we are currently accepting applications. We're accepting them between April and July. And you don't have to wait until July to get started. We are accepting on a rolling basis as these come in. Um, if you apply soon, because we're running out of time, but if you apply soon, I mentioned that training that we have coming up in Philadelphia, June 25th and 26th. If you do apply and you are accepted to the Washington cohort, you would be eligible to receive some funding. We only have a limited number of spots left. So if you're interested, definitely apply sooner rather than later, but you would be eligible to have a member of your organization receive funding to travel to Philadelphia and participate in that 2-day training. So that'd be a great opportunity to, meet other Community Webs members from all over the country and really just kind of get some hands-on training with web archiving and digital preservation and community archiving. So that'll be coming up in June. And then in August, everyone who is accepted to that Washington cohort, we will start having some training. So in August, we'll have a cohort kickoff meeting, which will be an opportunity to meet the other people in the program. And then we'll have a digital preservation training. So this will be some asynchronous training, some documents for you to read through, some videos to watch. And then we'll have a discussion group on the topic of digital preservation, and we'll have kind of a digital preservation, expert join that call to answer your questions. Then in September, we'll do the same thing, but focused on web archiving. So some web archiving training, and some of the Internet Archive's web archivists will be part of that discussion group to answer questions that you have. And then in October, we'll do something similar, focused on community archiving, and have Natalie Milbrode involved in that training. And then starting in November, we would want to have your organizations kind of take on a project that you want to launch in your communities focused on one of the areas addressed in the training. So you can, maybe your project is, I want to start an oral history project, or I want to host a community scanning day. Or maybe your project is, I want to start preserving websites and I'm going to launch a web archive collection in my community. So these don't have to be really expansive projects. They can be simple first steps, but we really want you to be able to take the training that you have gone through and be able to apply it in your community. So starting in November, we'd be asking you to take on one of those projects, and you would have support from the State Historical Society, but also from the Internet Archive. So the ability to schedule, one-on-one support sessions and get feedback on your projects over the time that you are working on them. And then we're going to work out the final details of what that will look like, but we're thinking that, that would carry on into 2026, and then we'd have some sort of opportunity for you all to present on the work that you've been doing. So I do hope you will consider joining, and do it quickly if you want to join us in Philadelphia. I'd love to have a lot of Washington colleagues there with me. So it's a pretty straightforward application process, just a form with a few questions. We really just want to know more about your organization, the work that you do, and why you're interested in joining the program. Okay. So at this point, I will open things up for questions. My email address is here. You're welcome to email me if I don't get to your question today, or if you have questions that you think of later on. And then this is also the web address for the Community Archives website, or the Community Webs website. And this goes to kind of the general apply link. But if you're interested in joining and being part of the Washington cohort, you'll want to follow that link that Dylan put into the chat.
Thank you, Anna. I did, throughout the conversation, link to a number of different resources, and it was mentioning as we went along. So you can always open up those links and kind of save them for later to go check them out after this webinar if you would like. Um, I just wanted to acknowledge we got a couple of questions in the chat that I'll start with first. I just want to say Paul Jackson was linking to a number of different projects that he's been working on, which are phenomenal. Thank you, Paul. We had a question about, I believe, and I think Anne had to leave the call, but she asked about if there are watermarks. I believe that was during the portion where you were talking about the access portal.
Right.
So yeah, I was kind of curious how the access versions
Yeah.
of those work.
So it'll be up to you once we set that up what you want to upload. However, we definitely encourage to provide as much free and open access as possible for the content that you upload. What we often encourage Community Webs members to do is to have a statement that specifies, you have to ask permission to use our content. Here's the contact information. Here's the link to our website that'll be displayed right under the item, as opposed to using watermarks, or if you want to upload maybe lower resolution copies and then let people know that they can contact you for higher resolution copies. However, that is up to your organization. We don't ban you from using watermarks, but again, just try to support as much open access and as few barriers to access as possible.
Great, thank you. Paul, I see you have your hand raised.
Yeah, I had a question for Anne. I think I work with you. You asked me to donate to my videos to the Tacoma Library Archive. Is that you?
Yes, that
Okay.
is me. That was back in my old job. Good to hear from you.
Yeah, congratulations on the new position. And
Thank
so I'm
you.
still doing videos. As Dylan just mentioned, I'm posting up some stuff. I'm recently got a friend of mine who wants to create the Manny Ellis mural. He
Okay.
is Cuban born, but he lives in Florida. And what he wants to do is collect a lot of pictures and use a technology called photogrammetry to make
Okay.
the 360 or make the virtual world for Manny Ellis. And I put a link in the chat with the 360 video that I shot the other day of the mural. So
Okay, great. Yeah, and we could certainly, I saw that you actually applied for the Washington cohort, so thank you so much for submitting that
sure.
application. If it would, this could be something that we could talk about in terms of collections access, and I know you do a lot of oral histories and video interviews. So certainly something where we could set up that access portal for you. And then
Cool.
Tacoma Public Library is still a member of Community Webs. So we could just loop them into the conversation too, to talk about, providing access to through multiple access platforms, because they operate their own kind of separate platform as well for collections access called
Okay.
Northwest Orca.
Great. So I was born in Philadelphia.
Oh,
So
okay.
I'm
Yeah.
interested in going back. And so we'll talk
Yeah.
offline. All right,
Okay,
cool.
great. Yes, I have your contact info. Thank you.
Excellent.
Thanks. Thank you. I'm going to jump to one more. It looks like we had one more question in the chat, and then as we were going along, it was a question about do you recommend checking, or are there ways to look up to see if local public libraries are also doing some of this web crawling effort, so that you're not duplicating efforts as organizations are diving into this project?
Yes. So one thing that you can do is you can look on the Community Webs website. There's a list of participants. So you can just scroll through and see, is there an organization in your community that's a member of the program? That will link you to their web archive collections. So you can kind of see what they're preserving, though you do have the option in Archive It to make collections that aren't public. So it may be worth, if you see public library, another organization in your community that's a member of the program, just reaching out and maybe developing a strategy about how you can maybe tackle different types of websites and not have that overlap, because we don't prevent that from happening. I mean, as many organizations as in a community can be preserving the same website. We don't prevent that in any way or know if that's happening. But there are certainly organizations in community webs where maybe a local historical society and the public library and a museum are all members of community webs. So they do work together to kind of think about how they're going to develop their own web archive collections.
I did have another question that came up in the chat. They just wanted to ask about the trainings that are offered as part of the cohort-based model. Are those trainings virtual or in person?
Yeah, so those are going to be virtual trainings. Mostly they'll be asynchronous. So if you're accepted into the program, we'll give you a training plan that has some links to some videos and some documents for you to read through just kind of on your own. And then we'll come together virtually once per month to discuss the things that we learned that month and to get support on a particular topic and to hear from other people in the cohort about what they're thinking, what they're working on, the obstacles they're facing, and so on.
Karen, I see you have your hand raised.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, Anna, I don't think my organization is gonna be applying in this round, but I'd be very interested at the end to see what people in the cohort do for their project. So if there's a way to see those presentations, I'd love to do that.
Yeah, and Dylan and Allison and I have been talking about, when such a presentation would happen and what that would look like for the group in Michigan. That's going to be happening later this summer, and that is going to be just a virtual training that the Internet Archive hosts, and then we'll be recording that. And we put all of our training videos online in the Internet Archive, so those are publicly available, but I'm sure that's something that Allison and Dylan can share out once we have that.
Yeah, nice. Thank you.
Tim.
Yeah, I personally have I'm part of a postal history group, and which entails the Northwest, Oregon, Washington, Idaho, and Montana. And we're always looking for information about old post offices and dead post offices. This sounds like a great resource. My and what I've done is my own personal collection I've made available to anybody who wants to use it for their articles or their books. And I'm wondering, though, about uploading this. I know that I'm still an active collector, but uh, I'm worried that I'm not opposed to uploading my collection for the purpose of using for books and whatever. But my main concern is that I noticed that on eBay a lot, that I'll see photos that are posted that they claim are public domain, which I don't have a problem with, but um, I I don't want someone to benefit from my uploading my personal collection, which is very valuable because I've been collecting for over 50 years. Is there a way, I guess you kind of answered that, is that they need permission to access that, or I'm wanting to make it as open as possible. And I know there's a lot of people in this organization who have been collecting for as long as I have,
Mhm.
who may not mind taking part in that, but I think they want to, an assurance that someone's not just going to willy-nilly use their information without, or make money off of it.
Mhm.
Is there a way to protect that?
So you would have the flexibility to provide whatever kind of rights and reproduction statement
Oh,
you think
okay.
is appropriate for your needs and for your organization, and that statement would be part of the information that shows up underneath the digital photograph or the publication
Okay.
or whatever the case may be. So if you have, a particular statement that you want to apply, but that's not something that we enforce. So it would really be about, the user reading that statement and
Right.
following the procedure, which I think is something that, comes up regardless of where you're providing public access to your content. I think the challenge would be if it is in the Internet Archive, it is accessible to a much broader audience.
Right.
But you could have, that statement, and many of our organizations have, a specific statement that says you have to contact us if you want to reproduce or use this image, and provides that contact information or links back to their site. But this is always a challenge, like I said, wherever you're uploading your content, because you can't necessarily enforce that or follow up to make sure that
Right.
everybody is adhering to that. And then also you have to be on top of updating that information. So if you have a particular person's email address in that statement, and then that person is no longer involved in that project, you just kind of have to be on top of making those
Okay.
adjustments. But it would be clear that it was uploaded by your organization. It would be kind of on your organization's
Okay.
subpage within the Internet Archive.
Well, I know that Ed Nolan has been to my house and he wants my collection, but I don't, I mean, I can't just give it to him, but I thought a kind of an in-between, I'd be willing to, I've even told him that I can donate copies and for use, but he's not in the historical society isn't into copies, they're into originals, and I can understand that.
Yeah.
But I thought this might be a kind of a go-between where people could actually access it and use it. But my main concern would be them making money off of it.
Yeah, and I definitely understand that, where Ed's coming from, and that would have been my
Right.
same response in my last position at Tacoma Public Library when we were acquiring things like that. So this could potentially work in the way that you're describing, and that, we don't ask you to give us any physical material,
Okay.
just provide kind of the space for you to upload that, but you'll just have to determine, what would that statement look like. You can definitely look at some examples from other Community Webs members, but we don't have any kind of, enforcement mechanism.
Right.
If there is a takedown request, if someone says, this is violating the copyright of this item, we do check with the person who uploaded that content to see if you have the necessary permissions, but we do have to abide by those takedown policies.
Right.
So if we were contacted, we would have to take that down, but we don't delete the content. We still preserve it, and it's still part of the Internet Archive, even if it's just a dark copy and we can't provide public access to it.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Other questions? I also have one if there are none are rising to the top. Well, while you're thinking, I was curious about if the community webs, if the excuse me, access to the archives through community webs, if there is analytics available to the organizations that participate to see kind of who, how much those materials are getting utilized, and if so, if there's what kind of information they might be able to see from that.
That's a good question. There are analytics. We use an analytics service called Plausible. I think I can access every Community Webs member's analytics, but I've never tried to do that. So, but there are certain things that you can see publicly on your collections page. So if I'm looking at a Community Webs members collection page and I just go to kind of the general about information for that organization's collections, there is some information that just automatically appears about the analytics. So it shows you the last time the content was accessed. It shows you where the person was that accessed the content, where in the world. And I think that's it, that automatically shows up. But we do, I believe, have the ability to delve more into that. My department actually doesn't, we have a separate collections department that really manages the Internet Archive's collections as a whole. So if that's of interest, I can work with them to figure out exactly what we're able to see and provide to individual members. You can access the analytics for your web archive collections through that Archive It service.
Any other questions before we wrap up?
Thank you.
All right. Well, yes, I just want to say, Anna, thank you so much. This is fantastic. I'm really excited about this project, about the Community Webs project in the Washington cohort specifically. I do encourage any of you that are interested to apply. I think this is a really great opportunity. Alice and I have been really thinking about this in particular as we gear up for the American Semi-Quincentennial in 2026. Really kind of working on organizations both having their collections digitized and also preserving those things that are now online for future generations. That this is a real key piece of our museums and our state's history. So we encourage you to apply. If you are interested, we've got a number of other workshops coming up as part of our Common Concerns series coming up throughout the May. Our next one on May 15th. We've got a couple of leaders from state agencies that are going to be talking about updates on the federal funding cuts and impacts on kind of organizations throughout the state. That's next week, May 15th at 10. That one, unlike many of our other common concerns, that one we will not be recording. That one's kind of more time sensitive, and we think the discussion, the questions are going to be the most fruitful part of that conversation. We'll also be focusing on May 20th on inclusive communications. So join us at 10 a.m. for that one. And then on May 27th, responding to community feedback, also at 10 a.m. You can find information about all those upcoming workshops and how to register for those here. I'll drop the link in the chat. And then the recording to this webinar we'll put up on our Heritage Outreach YouTube channel. I'll send out the link to everyone that registered for this event to this recording, as well as links to this Community Webs sign up and yeah, how to register and information about the program running from August to November this year. Again, I just want to say thank you, Anna. Thank you to all of you for joining us today, and hopefully we'll see you all back here next week.
Thank you.
Thanks so much. Take care.